Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webcast, Access the Power Within the AutoCAD Electrical Database. Today's presenter is Rick France, an AEC Solutions Engineer with Hagerman & Company. We also have with us Forrest Judd, a Solutions Engineer, to assist in answering questions. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that you are in listening-only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and Rick will address them at the end of the presentation. Also, when you exit GoToMeeting, you will be prompted to fill out a survey. We ask that you take a few moments to fill that out. Additionally, all attendees will receive a certificate of attendance and a link to the recording of this presentation. Rick, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Just a reminder that at the very end of this webinar, where there's going to be a link that I will give you to download some VBA code that I'm going to show you when we get to the latter part to how it works. But we got several things to go to before we get that. And basically what we're going to focus on is some of the things you can do with Microsoft Access, and also a new file that is that has come with 2015. We're going to address it because it kind of replaced something that you used to be able to do in Access. But the first thing is I'm just going to show you, I'm going to go over here to the icon menu, and we're going to talk about the list box defaults. So right here I'm going to place a push button into my drawing. When I go to the lookup here, you'll see the default that it goes to, which many of you have probably seen them 100 times if you've been using AutoCAD Electrical, is the Allen Bradley 30.5 millimeter extended red. So that's the default that we're talking about here first, is how to change that. And unfortunately, there's nothing inside AutoCAD Electrical that allows you to change those defaults. You have to do this in Microsoft Access. I'm just going to cancel out here. I'm going to stay in this dialog box right here because it's a live database, so we can actually work on it at the same time. Right here's my default catalog out of the box. Now this particular default catalog I created with only Allen Bradley, and I did that on purpose so that it would speed up some of the things that we do, because much of what I'm going to do here today can be done on the entire database. But
hey Rick, sorry, this is
sure.
Forrest, real quick. I think your screen might be paused.
Oh, my screen is paused. I am so sorry. I tell you what, I'm going to start over then with the
All right.
putting this push button in. All right, now it should be showing, right? You can see my screen with the ladder diagram?
There we go. Perfect.
All right. Okay, so let's put this push button in here again. And when I go to the lookup, there's what I was talking about with the Allen Bradley 30.5 extended red as my default right here at this point. So what we're going to do is here's my default catalog that I've installed. Like I said, it's just Allen Bradley. That's all I've placed in here to make this a little bit easier. Now, just in case you've never opened up the database in Access, I'll just point out a couple of things. This is your family descriptions where they are stored. Your pin list. Normally, if you have more manufacturers, you're going to have a lot more pin lists, a lot more of the term props listed in here, because it's going to have one for every client. And then every piece of family code you can imagine. So it's got my circuit breakers, it's got my lights, my limit switches, fuses, anything you can think of is listed in here. And this is where all the data is stored for that catalog. Now what we're talking about right now is the list box defaults right here. In Access, I can just double click it and it'll open it up. And so basically I'll point out a couple things here. Pre-2015, if you are on 2014 or earlier, then all you have to do is fill in the defaults in the correct column. Doesn't matter which column it is, but if you wanted catalog information, you could add that default there, and everything works based on the column it is in. 2015, they made a change to the way that the catalogs work inside AutoCAD 2015. So with 2015, the only columns that will work are the manufacturer, the type, and this coil voltage style. Now I'll show you in a little while it's not that big of a negative, because I can put any information, even information from other columns, in any of those three columns, and it will work. But for now, when I'm looking at this particular push button, you'll notice that it is a PB11. is the one that we're looking at here. So just that's going to be the key for what it's using for this default box here is the actual WD block name. If you don't know what that means, push button being the family code, the first one stands for a parent, one for parent, two for child, and the second one is your normally open, normally closed, one for normally open, two for normally closed. So this particular one is looking for a push button that's a parent that's normally open. So back here in the database, I'm going to come down here and locate the PB11, which is right here. You can see there's a PB11L, there's an M, the M is a mushroom head. I'm not even sure what the L is off the top of my head, but you can see there's a few push button 11s. We're just going to deal with this one here. So this is the point where you can see it's getting that information that it's using for the database. So let's say I wanted to make my defaults always be a 22.5 millimeter. Instead of red, I wanted to use GR. I don't have to use the whole word. I just need to use the first part of any word that's going to be in that default. Come back over here to AutoCAD Electrical, hit lookup, and you can see it's searching now for Allen Bradley 22.5 millimeter green or gray. If I come on down here, you can see there's going to be some gray ones pop up eventually. I'm sure there's some gray ones. I know there are, but anyways, it's searching for all the green or gray, using that for the actual search that it's working with right now. So this file at this point, this is all it's doing, is setting up how this is going to look. So again, I'll just give you another example. If I don't even have to search a column if I don't want to, all the accessories start with ACC. So if I place that in there, hit my lookup, now my default's Allen Bradley ACC. So it's only looking for the accessories. Now the way this is working also in 2015 is because it's only those three columns, it's automatically searching as long as it finds a match in that column. So in other words, to explain what I'm doing, but I can hit enter and get it to work. So just to kind of explain that, the type also has included in it, some of these push buttons, the word flush for flush mounted. When I come back into AutoCAD at this point, because it can't find a type, oops, I didn't click out of that particular link. You got to click out of the one you're changing to make it take. Because it's not able to find a flush as the start of the word type, it just kind of says it can't find anything. But if I hit enter there in 2015, now it's actually searching, and you can see it's finding the word flush in the type. Now to show you that it does not have to be in those columns. What I meant by that, if I come in here, instead of just looking for flush, I'm going to look for an 800T, one normally open, one normally closed. Now 800T would normally be what you'd put in the catalog in 2014 or before. The one normally open, one normally closed, what you'd put here. And there, with that, I would not have to hit the enter or anything, because it's going to find those based on the column. But because this one's just using these three columns, it's not going to find 800T in that column. It's not going to find the one normally open, normally closed in that column. So basically, again, it will just say it can't find anything. But as soon as I hit enter, it searches all the columns at that point in 2015, and you can see it's pulling up 976 Allen Bradley 800Ts that have the one normally open, one normally closed on the contacts. And as far as you search all the way down, it's going to match that criteria. So that's basically the way it works. But I'm going to go ahead and change it to the one that I normally use for my defaults. I'm going to make it 800T flush. And by doing that, now I'm able to find just, I always have to hit enter, the 24 one that match that particular criteria. Allen Bradley 800Ts that are flush mounted as far as the type. So that's kind of how the list box works. It's mainly not working automatic in 2015. You have to hit that enter, but that's because of the changes they made, to where now instead of searching by column in 2015, you are literally searching all the columns at the same time and that's what is happening right there. I'm going to go ahead and place this 800T A1A, hit OK, and we're good to go at that point. Now if I come over here to the catalog browser, which is new to 2015, so this would not be at all in 2014 or earlier, you can see that it's still looking at all the same defaults, and it's remembering all my past searches. This is pretty cool, but it can get pretty full pretty fast. So for instance, if I started searching for anything, it's going to search every column, and it's going to remember every little search I ever do. And that list is just going to keep growing and growing and growing, even if you search for something you didn't mean to search for by accident, like I did right here. So that's an ever-growing list. And I'm going to show you how you can control that later. Another thing you can do here that's brand new to that's brand new to 2015 is you can have what's called favorites. And I'm going to come up here to my lights. And so right now, I'm just going to search for everything. By not having anything in there, you can see it's searching for the lights. And right here, let's say I wanted to make this one of my favorites. Click it, hit the favorite there. And over here, if I click favorites, right over here, it kind of bookmarks the lights that I've saved as favorites. So you can see I already had 2 of them set up here in my favorites. And I just added that one. And from here, I can just click it, insert it, and it will have all the information already in it, and it's ready to go working with those favorites. So working with this, because of the changes they've made, it no longer has, and as long as I'm in favorites, that's all it's going to look at, so I need to turn that off, but it's no longer going to allow you to make the changes necessarily for this building of let me get back to push buttons. It's not going to let me keep every change that I'm making here in the actual database. It's not handling this list of what it's remembering from the past in the database, nor is it handling the favorites in that database. It used to handle everything that way. Those are now being handled in a different method. Basically, there's a file, and I need to do this, I'm going to have to close out of AutoCAD. So let me close out, and I'll just save it. And we don't need this one open for this part. And basically there's a file which is called this Autodesk Electrical Shared Control Config, and that's controlling it. Now I'm going to pull up a little screenshot here for you. There's the name of the file that's going to control this, and there's the location it's going to be on your computer. So you may want to write this down as much as possible, but what's in yellow is going to vary from computer to computer. For instance, username, of course, is going to be whoever logs in. So it's going to be under the users, then username, and then go into this app data. The other numbers here, folders here, are automatically generated by AutoCAD, and it's going to vary from computer to computer. But then they should be the only files there. Whatever it generates, you go through there and find assembly files, and you'll find this file. Now, this file cannot be on a network. It cannot be moved to a different location. There's no way to define at this time in 2015 where that file is located. So it's going to be unique to every computer in your company. However, you can make a copy of, maybe if you're the CAD manager, for instance, you could make a copy of this file, put it on off of your computer, get it cleaned up the way you want it, and then port it out to everybody else in your company to where everybody has the same defaults, the same, not defaults like in the list box defaults, but the same default list and the same favorites list. Now, if you're doing that, you have to be out of AutoCAD to do it. Now, another method is if you ever want to just clean it up, that list has gotten too unmanageable, you can always just delete this file, open AutoCAD Electrical, close it, and it will recreate this file, and it'll be cleaned up with nothing in it. But if you do that, be aware that you'll lose your favorites. So I would keep a backup if you've got favorites and things like that you want to keep working with. This file is an XML file, so you can edit it with Notepad, which is what I'm going to use, and this is what it looks like. A couple of things to point out. is, you know, it remembers my last one that I worked with as far as whatever my last push button was. I'm going to come down here and you can see here's my control relays where I've got a favorite set up. Here's the one I added for that light. And here's that search string down here that I've been working with. So let's say I did not want to keep all these in here. I needed to get rid of some. It's as simple as just coming in here and highlighting what you want and deleting it. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of a couple others here. All the way down through here. We'll just get it down to there so that these are the only 4 I want in my search string. Thing to remember when you do this, be sure to change your number of your search string because it needs to match. So I'm going to change this to 4 since that's all I have kept here. But I also want to show you that I can even do some editing without AutoCAD Electrical. If you're CAD manager and you want to just get some quick favorites in here, I'm going to take and copy this one because it's going to be so close. I think I hit my mouse and moved it. There we go. So right here under favorites, here under the push buttons, I'm going to copy that one here. And all it really needs is to know the name of the catalog information and manufacturer, and if there's an assembly code. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of these. So we're going to say A2A, A3A, 4, 5, and 6. So I can come in here and just change these one right after another fairly quickly. I put all 2s. There you go. That was real smart. It's that new math they're teaching at school. It's messed me up. All right, then we'll copy that, and we can change all these to the B's. So this one, I do want to make them all the same. So as long as I've got the catalog information, that's going to work. But again, just like before, I need to make sure my number of favorites is correct, or else it will zap them all. If I leave it at 0 when I open it up in AutoCAD, it's just going to zap everything I just did. That was 12, so I'll make sure it says 12. And now I've got some push button favorites I'm going to add in there. And this is, once this is done, you could save this like someplace to where off from the computer so that as it grows, you can always get back to it if you just want to overwrite this file. It's literally what I did at the beginning of the class. Is I have one that had a couple of favorites in there that I just overwrote this file and I was good to go. Once I've done that, we'll go back into AutoCAD Electrical here. Take a second to open it. And let's get back in our drawing. Now when I come to my catalog browser, here I am at push buttons, and you can see it's down to just the 4 that I put under my search string. So I was able to clean that out, get it down to something that didn't have a bunch of junk in it and only the stuff that I needed. Likewise, if I come over here to favorites on push buttons, there's my 12 push buttons I just added without even doing it from AutoCAD. So it's a nice, quick way to do it. Gets everything in there, and you're good to go. So that's basically how that file works. But now I want to do another little trick that we can do with that Access database. First thing I'm pointing out here is, as you see, there are no pin settings on the push buttons, which I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of. Likewise, I'm just going to cancel out. If I go up here to the light, no pin settings. I'm a very lazy person. I don't want to have to do this, type in pin settings for this all the time. So I used to use the pin list settings within the database to set these up to where I had some global things that I wanted to work with. So for that, I'm going to come right back to my catalog. And I'm going to show you this one here. This is the one we're going to be working with to migrate into our default one. And let me explain what's happening here. This one here was an exact copy of the default catalog. If you look at the default catalog, and I went to push buttons, you can see of the Allen Bradley push buttons I have, well, come on, tell me, There it goes. I had to finish counting. I had 54,117 push buttons in here. So I basically took that catalog, made a copy of it, and I renamed it to 800T because I'm going to deal only with the 800Ts today. So we'll open this one up. And the difference is between the two right now, first of all, I deleted everything out of this particular catalog except for my pin list, my lights, and my push buttons. Mainly because if I have everything in there, it's going to take longer to process. And as it is, just bringing it down to these three things will take about 60 seconds to process when I'm finished here in a minute. But just to show you, it's the same exact catalog. If I come down here, it should tell me in a second here that it's 54,117 push buttons. Oh, get off there. There you go. 54,117 push buttons. Exact copy. Nothing's changed from that default catalog. Where I have made changes is right here in this pin list for Allen Bradley. And I've gotten rid of everything in this pin list except for what I want to migrate. So first of all, most people think that migration utility is only good for going from AutoCAD from 2014 to 2015 or 2013 to 2015, something like that. But you can actually use the migration utility on a 2015 catalog in 2015. You could do the same thing in 2014. This right here is the way I usually do my pin list in the past. I've done it this way for years. Previously to 2015, you could use wildcards in the pin list. So I could just set this up like this in my pin list, and it worked exactly as I needed it to in that version. It would find the match and work. In 2015, they made a change. You can no longer use a wildcard in the pin list. The pin list has to be assigned to every catalog entity itself. So I don't know for sure how many 800Ts there are in there. I'm sure we saw a minute ago it was several thousand when we were dealing with it with just searching through it using the browser. But I don't want to have to go through 1,000 of these and change the pin list. I'm never sure which ones I'm going to use. So if you kind of know how, for instance, Allen Bradley names things, you can usually figure out how to set this up to where it would work. So thinking of it in terms of 2014 and earlier, I have in here an 800T with a wildcard and then in an A. So any catalog number that was an 800T that ended in A was always a one normally open, one normally closed push button. So that way I could just define the coil pins in the pin list, just like you would in a relay or in a motor starter. If you've ever seen how they will put in, when you put in that relay and it puts in, you know, K1, K2 or whatever the pin list is for that relay, and then you put in the connector, the contact to it, and it would put in the next two available pins for normally open contact. Same concept here, but I'm going to do it with push buttons and lights. So what you can, I'm not sure how well this shows up on the screen, so I'm going to open up Notepad here and kind of retype it just so you can see what it is. So for that first one, for the coil pins are basically the parent object when you insert it. Pin lists are for those child objects when you connect the child to it. So this being one normally open, has one normally open, one normally closed. It could actually be either type of push button. So it's one for normally open, comma, first pin, second pin. So pin 1, pin 2, and then you divide them by a semicolon. So the next one's going to be 2, comma, 3, comma, 4. So basically that's telling it if it's a normally open push button, it's going to be pin 1 and pin 2. If it's a normally closed push button, it's going to be pin 3 and pin 4. Now that's all I need for that one. But for instance, over here on the pin list, I've got the exact same thing, but I've added one more set here. That's with a semicolon and 4, comma, X1, comma, X2. Now what that means is anything that's not a normally open, normally closed, it will use this. So for lights, if I put a child light on the push button, it's going to assign to that light that's a child X1 and X2 for pins 1 and pin 2, which is the normal pin settings for Allen Bradley. So you can kind of see here, this one being one normally open, one normally closed. If it ends in B with an Allen Bradley, it's going to be 2 normally open, 2 normally closed. So for that, I've got for the parent, it's going to either be normally open, normally closed. So it's the exact same thing as what was on the A. But here I've added 1 and 2 for, I've got after here another normally open pin 5 and 6 for normally open, pin 7 and 8 for normally closed. Again, the light one for starting with a 4. So I went down through here and I've got these all set up. Here, this one right here is a 2 normally open pin setting, and that's the only option. So I only have 1, 2 because it's only normally open is my only choice. But here I have my 2 pin settings for normally open. This one being only 1 normally open, so all I have is my coil pins here for the parent, and then I've got a child where I can connect a light to it. And so you can kind of see how that's working. Lastly, I have my lights here. Allen Bradley lights are 800T-P, and they're going to have X1, X2 for their pin settings. Now, there are push buttons that are 800-P, but they're going to either end in a D1 or D2. So they're going to get changed. This works from top to bottom, so they'll get updated here, and it won't update them again, so it'll ignore them for the second as it's passing through these for the lights. So that's the reason I have them in the sequence that I have them also, because that was the way it would search in 2014 and earlier. So what they did with the migration utility is they set it up to where if you have this type of setup in your 2014 or earlier catalog, they've got a tool in there that will actually take that and it will add all that information to each coil pin and pin list within each catalog entry. So I'm going to use that migration utility with this even after 2015, and I could do this however many times I want to. If I wanted to do it just for these and come back later and do the 800Hs or do a different brand, as long as I know their sequence, I can make this work over and over again as many times as I want to, just using the migration utility. So I'm going to close this one up. We'll come back over here into AutoCAD. On the Project tab, grab Migration Utility. And remember, that was a 2015 catalog, so I'm going to use Custom. Another advantage of Custom is it cleared everything out. All I'm interested in is Catalog Lookup, which is right there. Over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to use a Merge Overwrite, so that way it's going to merge the 2 catalogs together and it will overwrite entries in the records with any changes. Now remember, it's the exact same catalog, so I care if it's overwriting in that sense, but it's going to create these pin lists at the same time. Come over here to Source. My source is over here. It's going to be the default CAD 800T I was just kind of walking you through. And then I'm going to use for my destination the default catalog that I'm using here. I've got everything pointing to a different location so it doesn't mess up the real ones on my computer, so it'll just be the Allen Bradleys. Because like I said, it'll go through every entry. When I do this, we'll hit OK. And then OK. So now that it's got the source destination, it's going to go through here. By the way, you have to have Service Pack 1 for this to work if you're not using the default catalog location in AutoCAD Electrical. So you got to make sure, and it's best to get Service Pack 1 anytime you're doing the migration utility. They had some errors in the original release that they fixed in Service Pack 1. That was the main purpose of Service Pack 1. For Allen Bradley only, it's going to take about 60 seconds here, but it's basically going through that default catalog, that 800T, taking all the changes it sees and merging them into my default catalog that I'm using out of the box. Hold on just one second. Once it's finished, it's a live database, so I don't even have to, that's why I'm still in AutoCAD Electrical here. I can make this start working right off the bat. It's almost done. Should have music for this part of it. All right, there it's done. So now, come back over here into the catalog, and if I put in, let's say, this 801A again that we put in earlier, and I'm going to place it right here on this rung, and notice it put in pin number 1 and 2. We'll hit OK. Let me go back to schematic here. If I change this from a normally open to normally closed, automatically changes the pin settings to 3 and 4. So I'm saving myself quite a bit of time just by not having to worry about those pin settings in any of those again. I'm going to put a child object here of a push button, and we'll set it up as the parent. Now notice this time I picked the normally open. This was in one normally open, one normally closed. So as soon as I do this, I get the dreaded message telling me I don't have any availability on that one to put another normally open. Because I'm using the pin settings now on that pin list, it's understanding that this has one normally open, one normally closed, and it's giving me the warning, just like it did with the relay in the past. Hit cancel, we'll go grab a normally closed one right here. As you'll see, as soon as I connect it up, this normally closed one should get the 3 and 4 pin. Put a second light on it. Put this green light on right here. So I've now got my 800T series of the Allen Bradleys working no different than the relays. Notice I put the X1, X2 in there. Put a solo light in there like this one. We'll just put one down here. They're also working, and we'll just come off go over here to the lights. So they're solo working here. Come on, there it comes. Oh, it says I got a command already running. That's okay. And you can see it put in the X1, X2 because of the 800T-P star that I had in that particular box. And it went through and it picked all of them. It was just basically knowing the sequence and way that AutoCAD Electrical, or the Allen Bradley rather, is naming their catalog information. I just had to I came up with how they were doing it years ago. And just to show you how I did all of it, I'm just going to hit the edit button here. Because out of the box, if I was just doing one, this is the way I would do it. I would just edit that entry and go all the way. There's no longer a pin list database editor. You would edit it through the catalog browser like right here. And you can see here all those coil pins and pin lists. Those are all blank before I ran that migration utility from that catalog. So I was able to have a lot of control over thousands of push buttons and lights in just 60 seconds after I filled it out. It took me a little while to fill it out, but I did that years ago, and that's the reason I was able to just get this to migrate forward. And again, I could go and run that migration utility on, do another one for, fuses or something like that, and make it work with all the fuses and get all those in there, just recreating the file from the 2015 and putting the information in with the wildcards. And you get some pretty good results, because I don't know about you, I would not want to go fill every last one of those out one at a time. Even filling out the ones that I use, because most of us have certain ones we use over and over again. Even filling out those, let's say you had 100 of them that you're going to be filling out, that would take some time. I could copy and paste them in this catalog browser when I'm in the editing function. Still would take a lot of time to do it if you do it with the migration utility. That was probably 5 minutes worth of work if I was doing everything from scratch, as long as I know the system I'm using. But that's basically how I can use Microsoft Access and the databases and the migration utility to get even more information into my catalogs without having to go one at a time. Now let's look at some PLCs here. This is where the VBA part's going to come in here in just a little while. I'm going to put in a PLC, and I'm using this Allen Bradley 1747. I thought I was using this 46. 71447, that's right. L20A here. I'm going to place this one in. And as you can see, there's going to be a couple of things we're going to make changes to that database with globally. So we'll just get one in here pretty quickly, or as quick as my clicks can take me. Whoops, wrong one. It doesn't matter, I guess, for a webinar. But all right, here's the first thing I want to point out. Here's a dialog box that we get all the time. You've probably seen it before, where it's wanting to know, how do you want to do this, octodecimal or hexadecimal? One of the things we're going to fix in the catalog globally, our company standard is decimal. make-believe company standard that I'm using for this webinar. We use decimal. So I don't want it to ask me this every time I put in a PLC. I want to get rid of this dialog box and tell it always use decimal. So that's one of the things we're going to do right now. I'm just going to hit decimal, and that's one box I want to get rid of. Second thing, I'm going to go over here to my project properties. And as you can see, I'm using for my component tag format family code the %F, %S, %N. So family code, sheet number, wire number. Wire numbers are set up to shake hands. They're using %S, %N. So are my cross references. All the way down to my drawing format, I'm using sheet and numbers for my ladders. So everything's working off that sheet and number, and it looks like everything's been working fine. I come over here, I'm getting push button 101 because that is sheet number, rung number. Sheet number, rung number. So that's %S, %N, %F. And if I was running wire numbers, it would be the same format. However, my PLC came in. It's using PLC 14, which is just my rung number. Doesn't use my sheet number. Even though I've got it set up in my project to use that, it's not using my sheet number. Now I can fix that on this one by simply going to the edit component and the options and see PLC %N. I'll add my %S, hit OK, and it'll update. So now it's reading correctly. PLC, sheet number, wire number. However, that was just for that one. If I come back in here and put a second PLC in here, same exact one. Okay, module 2, okay. Break it and place it here. Decimal. Back to PLC 40. Because that fix by doing it through the component only fixes my current one that I'm working on. It won't fix it in the database. I could use the database editor for PLCs and fix it right there. But fixing it there would only fix that one. I've still got all of these that are going to be PLC %N. I've still got, whoops, go back to there. Still got every other Allen Bradley. This is going to be PLC N. There's thousands of them in here. I've got every PLC manufacturer installed for 2015. You know, Schneider Electric, all these, they're all still going to be PLC %N. It's only going to fix that one. I never know when we're going to be using what, and I don't want to have to sit here and fix it every single time we do a new one. So that's where we're going to come into the code. Now, when I was teaching classes, what we're going to do here is this is the ACE PLC database right there. On your computer, it's going to be under My Documents. It's in a different location than the other catalogs. I'll show you basically. Mine's a little bit different also, but it's going to be under My Documents, AE Data, AutoCAD E, AE. Then once you get to AutoCAD E, you'll see AE Data, English US, PLC, and right there's where it is. You can notice I've got mine on my computer named BAK right now, so it would use the one I've got elsewhere that I'm pointing at right now. I didn't want it to confuse it and all. But here, same exact file. I just made a duplicate of the one that came out of the box. No changes to this file has been made whatsoever. So we'll open up this one. Now, used to in the class what I would teach is if you needed to change one, I'll come down here and let's get something like, I don't know, what about a, oh, by the way, I need to be out of AutoCAD Electrical to do this, so let me go ahead and close this. I'm not going to save the drawings so those PLCs don't get saved, and I'll have those runs available in a minute. You don't want to do this while you're in AutoCAD Electrical. All right, so anyways, it's a live database, and it would work, but you can't save the database when I'm in AutoCAD Electrical, so that's the reason I got to get out. But let's say, I'll just grab one here. Let me see which one it is I want to get. Here you can see for a 1794, there's a special and a special. Let's do the power supply. There's a power supply and a power supply data. This power supply one is where you have information that's going in the module information. Now, one I'm going to point out here is address base. This is where you can tell it decimal or octal or hexadecimal. We'll say no, there's only one in that one, so let's pick a different one. Let's go to the 1797 discrete. Yeah, that one's got a bunch of them. All right, so there's always two, and one of them here is you've got the address base where you can tell it decimal, octal, or hexadecimal, and then you've got the one after that that tells how it's created. And you can see in each one of these there is a tag for PLC %N in the attributes column. So it's important to know your column name to use the VBA I'm going to be using. But in this particular one, that's not a good. I want one that has 4 or 5 in here at least. Thought I wrote one down. Yeah, 1769 has several. Let's go with that one. We'll do this one right here. See how it's only one there. Discrete combination data. All right, I give up. We'll just do it here. This one just has one. Come on, I should have wrote down which one I was going to use. Here we go. This one's got 2, 3, 4, several in here. So there's several in this one. So in the class, what I would normally do is to teach people is they could come into the one they wanted, the 1769 analog input, for instance here. Go up here to replace, and for this I'm going to tell it anywhere it says PLC %N, I'm going to replace it with PLC %S %N. I'm going to do it in the current document, any part of the field. Because this part of the same, there's several things in here, so I needed to find just that one. Current document means this table. So it's this table and this table along. So if I do a replace all, yes, in this particular table, it's now fixed all my tags to be PLC %S %N all the way through it. But that was this table only. If I look at any others, they're still going to be PLC %N. So you basically have to find the ones you use, change that table, find the ones you use, change that table, that type stuff. And that was the way I would teach it for years. And I kept telling people for the last 3 years, someday I'm going to write a VBA routine that will just do them all, and I won't have to do them over and over again. I put together earlier this year, I finally had a day where I kind of didn't have anything on my schedule, so I started working on this. And I got it to where I could do everything except for the columns. And I got Michael Z, I can't pronounce his last name, asked him some questions. He got involved. He showed me how to be able to loop through, find the columns, because the problem was you had this one here doesn't have an attributes column. So it would crash when I'd start trying to loop through it because I couldn't figure out how to tell the little routine when it's got a attributes column and when it doesn't. So he figured out that part for me, and we combined our efforts, and we came up with a routine that's pretty cool. Now, there's 2 things about this routine I need to show you before you can do it. First of all, in order to run the VBA, I can't have any kind of security warning right here. Also, enable content's not enough, because that's just going to say you can run a macro. The particular macro we're going to run is still not going to work unless we do a couple other settings here. So that's the first thing we're going to do is create some settings here. So basically, I'm going to go over here to File. This is Microsoft Access 2010. We'll hit Options. Now, in 2007, and I've only looked at 2007 and 2010, I can't tell you what it looked like before then. You'd hit the big A up here, and there was an option there to pick the options in the drop-down, much like there is in AutoCAD. 2010, it's there on the File tab. Right here, we're going to go to the Trust Center, and then the Trust Center settings. So I'm going to kind of pause a little bit, make sure in case you're writing it down, you can get this. But I believe there'll also be a recording where you can get this later too, if you need to. Under the Trust Center settings, for the macro settings, I need to tell it to enable all macros. The next thing is I need a trusted location. So I'm going to go to Trusted Locations, and here I need to add the location that I have the database in. So in my case, it's on my S drive under Company Data Catalogs. I hit OK. So there's my database location. I'll go ahead and say OK, And so now it's listed with the trusted locations. This is basically to protect you from viruses that you might pick up or something. So if it's not in that location, it's not going to trust it. It's not going to let it run. And it's also not going to let it run unless I enable it. So this is kind of the two things that got to be set up in order to make this work. So I'm going to say OK and OK. There's a third thing that has to happen. I'm going to come over here to the Database Tools. This is where you open up Visual Basic. It's on the Database Tools tab, and you'll see the Visual Basic tool right there. So I'm going to open that up. For this particular routine that I'm going to give you where you can download it later to use it as you wish, you have to have a certain thing installed. So you go under Tools, and it needs to be a particular reference. It's a library we got to attach. That comes with Microsoft Access. You just have to activate the library. Now, it varies the name of the library depending on whether you're a 32-bit machine or 64-bit machine. I'm a 64-bit machine, so I'm going to select it. I'm going a little fast when I select it, but I'm going to bring up a screen to show you the two that you activate depending on which one you have. So we've got our references. They're in alphabetical order, and this is one that's called Microsoft Office. So we find Microsoft Office stuff. Let's go a little bit slower since I'm close. And it's this 14.0 Access Database Engine. I need to activate that in order for it to basically find the column names. All right, so that was the first thing, but let me show you this in a PowerPoint here. Let me delete that. I'll hit F5. All right, so there's the name of the two that has to be activated. If you're 64-bit, you're looking for Microsoft Access 14.0 Access Database Engine Object Library. If you're 32-bit, you're looking for Microsoft DAO 3.6 Object Library. Now, even if you're in 64-bit, you're going to see the Microsoft DAO 3.6 one is there, but it won't work in 64-bit, so it doesn't do you any good to check it and activate it. So you need to activate one or the other for this routine to work, depending on whether it's 64-bit or 32-bit. I'll give you just a second in case you want to write those down or take a screenshot. However you want to do it to get that to where you actually know which one it was that I'm activating. All right, we'll go on from here. And next thing you need to do is you got to insert a module. So I'm going to select here, I'm in the Visual Basic application after hitting that button. I've already activated it. I'm going to add the module right here by right-clicking and doing Insert Module. To be honest with you, I don't care what the module's named. Module 1, you can name it whatever you want to. You can rename it down here. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to just keep mine called Module 1. There's no reason to change it. So what you're going to do when you get the link is you're going to be able to download a zip file that basically has this file right here called acevbacode.txt. Just open it up in Notepad, do a Control-A to get everything, do a Control-C, close it, come over here in the VBA and paste it in. And that's all there is to it. And it's going to give you some information about it. See, that's why I can't pronounce Michael Z's last name. All right. So basically the way this is set up is you can use this to do different things, but you only want to change what's here. Only what's below this point, and you don't want to touch anything below here unless you know what you're doing with VBA, because you'll mess it up if you do. But basically we can tell it the column name, the text we want it to find, and the text that we're going to replace it with. So the column name, as you remember, was attributes, or PLC%N, being changed with PLC%S%N. I'm going to put my cursor here on Find Replace Text, and right here's a Run button with that little green arrow. So we'll hit that, and they are disabled. I thought I enabled them. No, I didn't. I still have to hit this. Okay, sorry. Got to hit that button too still. Yeah. All right. Now go back to it. I forgot about that. Got to hit the button still. You just have to do the other stuff also. All right, so find replace text in column. Now we'll hit the play, and it runs through. Takes about 10 seconds or so. It's done. Now I can go here and look at any one of these data tables, and you'll see wherever it found PLC %S%N or PLC %N, it changed it to %S %N, and it did it with every single table. As you can see, ABB, Allen Bradley, General Electric, Mitsubishi, everything in here got that update all the way through. So the one we were using was a 1747 L20FC. So here's the one we were actually using earlier. And whoops, I'm in the module, in the wrong one here. It's the data one right here. And you can see it changed it in this one also. So a nice little routine. Goes through, searches through all that, made that change. Because it was one that's consistently I wanted to change so that all my projects are using the same naming tagging convention for my PLCs as it is for my components, for my wire numbers, for my ladders. Everything's using the same system now because I've updated this file. Lastly, I want that to be decimal. If you remember the decimal here for the address base, none of them are ever filled out of the box. I'm going to go right back to that same routine. I told you we're going to do two at the same time. So I just need to change the column name to address underscore base. Now address base is only in that one type of table. It's not in the one that we had the PLC in it or the tag information. So this time it's going to be using a completely different table. I'm going to take it down to quotes. That's what this note here is to tell you is if find text is set to quotes, then it's going to replace the entire field. In this particular case for address base, I can't have two different settings, so I want it to replace the entire field. And so that's why I'm using the quotes in here. A little warning here, if I did that on the attributes table, I would wipe the entire table with whatever else I would. At this point, I would wipe that entire table down to just PLC %S%N. I'm going to get all kinds of errors on the other side because stuff's not going to be working correctly. You want to be careful if you're using this to make sure. I would always back up my database before you do this. Before you do any of this stuff, good idea to always back up your database. I'm using a backed up database right now that I can get right back if I mess something up. But you always want to back up that database because there is no undo command in Microsoft Access for this. Once you've done it, it's done, and there's no and you can't. It's a live database, so it will not be something you can reverse. I'm going to tell it decimal. So address base, we're going to set to decimal. We'll go ahead and come up here and hit play. It just takes a couple of seconds there. It's done. Come on down here, look at it. You can see it put decimal on all the address spaces. And it did that in every table throughout the product. So I've got my standard set. That's one less dialog box because back here in AutoCAD Electrical, we're going to do it, put our stuff back in and see if it's fixed. All right, back to our drawing. Come over here, place one in, because I've got it open, sorry. Close it, we'll save it so we don't lose anything. Now we can place it in there. All right, so there's the L20A, just like I did before. Okay, module 1, okay. Set my output, break it, place it, set my input, and the next one would be where it asked me for decimal, hexadecimal, or octal. I'll say okay, didn't ask me. Two things happened, PLC 114. Second thing, it's decimal, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a change to it just to show how quick and easy it is. I won't be able to save this one because I'm not going to close AutoCAD Electrical to do this, but let's say they come back to me later and they go, no, you're supposed to be octal. Just go right back over here, Visual Basic, We'll change this from decimal to octal. Whoops, I'm going to get that error message because it's telling me that I can't save it since it's open in AutoCAD Electrical. And ACTAL. I was not hired for my spelling. We'll run it. We'll come back over here. We'll put in the exact same one we just put in, and it should be octal this time. Module 2. Okay, and there you go. 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. It's on octal now. So it's a nice little tool that will help you update that database with some things that you have that are global. You might want to, like I said, back up your system. Make sure that you try it out on some things because you may get results differently. One of the first things I did was when I was doing the pin list, for instance, I had my lights above my push buttons, and that caused some push buttons to get X1, X2 because of that. So sometimes it's sequence. You just want to test it and make sure you're right before you do it. You can download that VBA code at this location. Kindred is going to be sending you an email that will have a link into it, so you don't have to write this down if you don't want to. But basically, you go to this link, and it has to be uppercase, lowercase, just like it. Just click on that link in the email, or type this into your Internet Explorer or into Windows Explorer, and it will download it for you. Inside it, you'll find that an ASCII text file that has that, and you can add it to do anything like we just did. It's going to default to the to the tag on the attributes is what it's defaulting to. But it will work just like we had it here. I do know it works in both 2007 and 2010. Those are the only two I've tested it in. I see no reason it won't work in 2000. There's nothing unique in it that would not make it work in 2000. But I just haven't tested in it, so I can't guarantee it. But I do know it works in Microsoft Access 2007 and Microsoft Access 2010 because I have tested it in both of those. That's pretty much the end of what I have to show you. Hopefully you learned some things, and we'll turn it back over to find out if there's any questions or things like that I need to answer.
Hey Rick, this is Forrest. There was one good question that came up during the presentation that I'd like to share with everyone.
Okay.
This was from John Turlop. He asked if in the catalog browser, does the search include user fields?
Yes.
And it will, so long as your user interface is set up to show those columns. By default, I don't believe it is.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if never have paid attention if it's showing by default.
In my installation, it wasn't. So it'll only search the columns that are displayed.
Correct. And it's not showing up in mine either.
So to display those, you would right-click on any of the column headings and choose the More option, and then you can check any of the other fields that might be in the catalog. So as long as the fields are displayed in the catalog browser, the search will return results from those values. So like if you're using user 1, 2, or 3 for your internal part numbers, for example, you'd want to turn that on, and then you could search on your internal part numbers to find parts.
Very good, very good. Now one thing I'll point out here, if you'll notice when I was editing after Symbol 2D and 3D, we had coil pins and pin lists, and they don't show up in here. They're in a different table that when you edit, it's looking at both tables at the same time. When you're searching the catalog database, it's not going to show columns that are in other tables, and there's a couple of these that are in other tables that won't show up that you'll see in edit. But these are all the ones that are in the PB table of the default catalog, or the LT table of the default catalog. Anything else?
And on the question of pin lists too, Todd Hall had a question regarding pin lists that end up longer than 255 characters. Now the documentation says that the limit on the pin list field is 256. He mentioned that they removed the pin list continue column, and I mean, I've been using electrical for a long time, but I didn't pay too much attention to the pin list table, only here in the last few years, and I don't recall ever seeing that column. But
Let's see.
Are you aware of a time in the past where there was an extra column in a pin list table that would let you extend the pin list beyond 256 characters?
Not that I know of, but I've never tried to go above 256 characters before. What it
I
may
thought that's
be,
a lot of pins and long descriptors,
yeah.
but
What you may play with there is, for instance, it may be an issue of coil pins and pin lists don't need to be exactly the same, because this, like I said, would be more for parents and this is for child. And then you also have your peer coil pins, and so you may, if you're trying to combine everything into one or two, it may be one of these 4 columns might accommodate. There's a real good white paper on the pin list on the internet that you could find. I couldn't tell you the name of it all, but if you search for AutoCAD Electrical Pin List white paper, you'll find it probably, and it explains exactly what can be done in each column.
right. Unfortunately, it looks like Todd's left, so we can't clarify the question. But you're right. Like if you had a gang of parents and you were trying to get all of the pins on all of the parents in the pin list column, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. And instead, you would add to the peer coil pins and peer pin list.
Correct.
And that would give you at least another. And that may be why they replaced pin list continue years ago with peer coil pins and pin list.
Could be.
It may just be a matter of like renaming as opposed to disappearing.
Right.
Because this database structure has been pretty consistent for as long as I can remember using it.
Yeah.
I started in 2004.
Well, I was using it actually back when it was VBA, via
still
wire
VBA,
diagram, and I don't even remember the last time I saw the pin list continue.
Yeah.
It's been a long
time. That may be kind of replaced by the peer pin list and the coil pins. So
that would be my guess.
Those are both questions that the whole group might want to highlight.
Okay.
I think those are the only 2 questions aside from a question about the presentation that have come forward. I'm curious if anyone else has any other questions about the presentation.
What was the question on the presentation?
Oh, if someone was going to be able, if they was to be available for download, and Kendall answered that one.
Okay.
It'll be in the email link.
I'm sorry, I called Kendall Kindred earlier.
Oh, easy mistake. I don't see any other questions that have come in. We still have a few people in the meeting, so.
Well, Kendall, if you want to wrap it up.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for a great presentation, Rick, and thank you, Forrest, for helping answer questions. This concludes our broadcast today. If you have any additional questions, please reply to the confirmation or reminder email you received from GoToMeeting, and we will route those to the appropriate parties to get your questions answered. Also, you'll be receiving an email containing a link to the recording of today's presentation, and that email will also include the download link that Rick mentioned earlier. Once again, if you could please take a few moments to answer this short survey, we would appreciate it. It will appear when you close the session. Thank you for attending today's webcast, and have a great day.